Okay, so let us continue, move forward, and so we were looking at the definition of impulse response, specifically for continuous time. The impulse response is what the system produces at the output when it is excited by a direct delta function, delta of t. Now, you may have studied direct delta function as a part of your physics or even math course in the high school. If you have not, that is fine. We are going to kind of segue into this topic of direct delta because it's going to come handy later on. And just look at what it is and define its mathematical properties and so on. So this direct delta, which is generally denoted as delta of x, where x is a continuous variable, just like time variable that we were looking at, it's actually a mathematical function, and it has several interesting properties actually that we'll summarize now. Uh, so delta of x minus x naught is the same function located at x equal to x naught. Delta of x is the function located at x equal to 0. And when we think of this function, it's nothing but an impulse at that particular coordinate x naught. Okay. Why this x minus x naught is located at x equal to x0? And the reason is because when you plug in x equal to x0, the argument becomes 0. And this delta function uh, turns into an impulse when its argument is 0. And so therefore here uh, for the for this notation, the argument x becomes 0 obviously when x is equal to 0, and so therefore this is located at origin at x equal to 0, whereas this function delta x minus x naught is located at x equal to x naught. Now there is something called the shifting property of the direct delta function. By the way, this shift is an English word. You may or may not be aware of its meaning, but shift means to pass through a sieve. Like when you might have seen your mom or some your relative um, chaffing the wheat or some rice or something. That process is called sifting. It's basically to isolate a particular part in a bunch of assembly. And the shifting property of direct delta function says that if you take any function f of x, multiply it with delta of x minus x naught, and then integrate in the manner shown here from minus infinity to infinity, you get the value of that function at x naught. And so this shifting property we are going to make use of when we study the operation of sampling, because this is actually what we are doing here is sampling this f of x. We want to get its value at certain location x naught, and we use direct delta function to represent that sampling operation in a mathematical manner. Obviously, if delta of x is used here, then what you get is f naught, f of 0, because that will be the case when x naught is 0. Okay, what is the definition of direct delta function? The main definition is this one here, that you take an exponential phasor with complex valued argument, and then you integrate this phasor as a function of one of the free variables x or y, but here we are taking y to be the the variable which is getting integrated over, and then what you are left with is delta of x. We will shortly see why this equation 2 has to be the case. But before we do that, let us look at the other definition of the direct delta, which says that if you integrate delta of x from minus infinity to infinity, you get 1. And in addition, this delta of x is an impulse at x equal to 0, where its value is infinity, and everywhere else it is 0. Uh, Now this part here, you can see that if I substitute in this equation here, if I substitute f of x as 1, continuously 1 for all values of x, then this becomes simply this. And because f of x is 1 for all values of x, obviously f of 0 is also 1, and so we get this one here. Now let us look at the second part, that why is this delta of x is equal to infinity when x is equal to 0, and why it is 0 when x is not 0. And so that is what we will be looking at visually in the next slide or so. There is a very important property of the direct delta function which is called shifting property. See, there are two similar sounding properties. One is called sifting, other is called shifting. The shifting property is totally different from sifting property. Sifting property is used with direct delta function to do the operation of sampling, as we discussed earlier. Whereas shifting property of direct delta function makes use of convolution operation, in fact. What it says is that if you take any function f of x and convolve it with delta of x minus x naught, you get f, the function f, which is shifted by x naught. And so that gives us the definition of the impulse response that we were looking at in the previous slide. Suppose if I make this f of x into, instead of f of x, if I write here h of t, and then if I convolve it with delta of t, there is no x naught there, then according to this formula I will get back h of t, which says that convolution of the input delta of t with the system gives me the impulse response h of t. But obviously if delta function is not centered at 0 but it is centered at x naught, like what we have said here, then this function itself gets shifted by x naught. So it's kind of important to get a firm grip on this. So let us look at this shifting property visually. So here I'm taking x naught as some 5 unit of x. This is just an example. So let us see, suppose I have some f of x which looks like what is shown here. It starts from -2 and then it goes up to x of 4. So this is the shape of f of x. This is the signal. You can think of it as a signal, but it doesn't have to be. It can be any arbitrary function. X doesn't have to be time. X is just a variable here in this case. But the shifting property of direct delta function says that if I take this f of x and convolve it with a delta function at x minus x naught, then I get another function g of x is g of x, which is nothing but my original function f of x after it is shifted by x naught, which is 5 units. And so this same waveform gets reproduced here with a shift of 5 units. You see, it got shifted. So that is why this is called the shifting property of delta function, and it heavily makes use of the convolution operation. Essentially, when x naught is greater than 0, and if you look at some function which is f of x minus x naught, it means nothing but the original function f of x after it is shifted to the right by x naught. I mean, obviously if x naught is positive, and instead of doing f of x minus x naught, if you do f of x plus x naught, then it is as if you are moving in the opposite direction, which means that f of x is getting shifted to the left by x naught value. Okay, now let us go back to this equation number 2 and see why this has to be the case. That if I define this integral of exponential function, then why would I get delta x, which is infinity at x equal to 0, and it is 0 otherwise? So let us look at that. It's not going to be a very detailed proof, but it's more of a conceptual idea that I want to convey to you. So you see this exponential phasor e to the power j 2 pi xy has the real part, which is shown here. It's nothing but cosine of 2 pi xy, and the imaginary part, which is nothing but sine of 2 pi xy. And so the real part is shown here as a function of the argument 2 pi xy, and the imaginary part is shown over here again as a function of 2 pi xy. 2 pi xy is sometimes also called the phase of this complex exponential phasor, and so that's why I called it here theta. And what this diagram shows is the variation of the real and the imaginary part as the phase angle theta, which is same as 2 pi xy, as it changes from 0 to 2 pi, meaning that we are letting both the real and the imaginary part, the sine and the cosine, complete one full cycle. Now, when x is not equal to 0, this phase will always be non-zero. I mean, it will never be that it will be identically 0. And so that you will get some real part and some imaginary part. It cannot be that both are identically 0. And so when you integrate the real part, what will happen is that the positive areas, which are in green, will cancel out the negative area, which is in the blue. The total positive green area is same as total negative blue area, and so they cancel out, and so you get 0. Same way for imaginary part. And so whenever x is not 0, this happens. And so therefore the value of the integral becomes 0. However, when x is equal to 0, this whole term here becomes 1, because the phase becomes 0, and whenever you have e to the power 0, you get 1. So no matter what value of y is, you get 1, and so obviously when you integrate that constant function 1 from minus infinity to infinity, you get infinity. So that is the reason why we have this particular expression for direct delta function. Okay. So now let's come back to the convolution operation, and let us understand it in a little different manner. We are going to make use of linear algebra, essentially matrix and vectors. We'll be looking at this kind of in terms of dot products and so on. And so in order for us to appreciate this convolution operation in a meaningful manner, let us take an example where this x, the input, has 6 samples, x0, x1 up to x5. And here I am considering the discrete time case, dt case, x of n. And let us also assume that our system response, impulse response h of n, has some 4 values. It's a sequence of length 4, defined as h0, h1 up to h of 3. Then what happens is y of n becomes a sequence of length n. It is always the length of x plus length of h minus 1. So in this case it will be 6 plus 4 minus 1, which is equal to 9. And because now we are taking x and h to be not infinite sequences, the limits of integration don't have to be infinite, obviously. In one case, the limit of integration is from k equal to 0 to 5, or equivalently we can make limit of integration from u equal to 0 to 3 in these two different expressions. Now, let us, in order to understand this, let us see what is going on when we, for example, when we do this operation here. Okay. So what is this operation? What this summation here, how we can look at it is by considering a matrix which is shown here. This is, I am calling it H matrix. And the very first column of this H matrix is nothing but the same vector H of n. And this first column corresponds to k equal to 0. When k is equal to 0, H of n minus k is obviously equal to H of n. And so I am just putting H of n here. Now the second column corresponds to k equal to 1. And therefore this term here, H of n minus k, becomes H of n minus 1. But remember, H of n minus 1 is nothing but H of n shifted by 1 unit. And so that's why this column here got shifted by 1 unit. And a 0 popped up here. K equal to 2, meaning H of n shifted by 2 units. And so that is the third column. So different columns are for different shifts of this vector H. And there are a total of 6 columns because k goes from 0 to 5. The reason k goes from 0 to 5 is because x has total of 6 elements. And so those 6 elements are mentioned in this vector over here. This output y of n is also a vector. As we said, it is a vector with 9 elements. And this vector is obtained by multiplying this h with this x. Okay. Now, but then what about this x of k here? So what we are going to say is that this is x of k equal to 0, this is x of k equal to 1, k equal to 2, and so on. So here in this vector, as we go down the elements of the vector, k changes from 0 all the way to 5. So this is a matrix vector product view of convolution operation. Let us stop here and then we'll continue this discussion in the next video.